And we are live here with the Knights of Transformation, where we basically are going to help you to essentially transform your organization. Today, we have a very, very special guest. We have the acclaimed author of the book Plan C. But wait, there's more because he is not just an author, he is a directive communication psychology certified culture consultant. He is a directive communication psychology trainer. He is basically the has been the CHRO of multiple organizations globally. I mean, the guy has been around and done some serious stuff across organizations in changing and manifesting amazing cultures. None other than the one, the only Sanjeev Dixit. Dun dun dun.
Dan, dan, dan. Hi, Arthur. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Sanjeev. How are you?
Absolutely doing good. And thanks so much for a great welcome introduction. I think that was awesome.
All right. So, one of the things that the audience wants here is basically solutions. Okay. I mean, the pandemic is now like almost 20 months now. People have, lives have been disrupted. Organizations have been disrupted. Some have like shot up to the moon. Others have like broken down. And some are still, even after 20 months, trying to figure things out. And as someone who, I mean, has literally been dealing with this problem as a CHRO, uh, what are some of the factors? What are some of the key problems that you see still right now that organizations are facing?
Yeah, I think the very, very appropriate question at this point of time. I think the unprecedented COVID has had its own toll on the organization, whether in terms of their performance, profitability, revenue, demand generation. I think they are struggling across, beside the productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness of the people, leadership. So there is a multi-pronged issues which organizations are grappling with, enterprises are grappling with. Uh, but with the now COVID's little, you can say, being addressed, some of the key issues which I think all the leadership is facing is how to make the organization risk-free from all these kind of unprecedented, unplanned pandemics. How the organization can be more resilient, how the organization can be more agile, and I think that is where the responsiveness to the changes is being tested. And if we look at the overall scenario across the globe, organization which has got a very robust culture has done well compared to the organization which has been only driven by the strategic plannings and having excellent risk management strategies and all.
Well, that also goes back to the element of risk management. Okay. I'm sure that you can statistically measure that
Yeah,
those organizations who were more risk adverse are certainly the ones that have, well, basically hurt the most. Would you agree with that?
absolutely, absolutely. Because then you have only one line of thinking, what we call it the focus. And the focus has been always how we can mitigate the risk, minimize the risk, without looking at what are those human skills, what are those behaviors which can help people to manage those risks. What are those behaviors which will make them bounce back to fight any kind of challenges being thrown by all these dynamic situation, or the VUCA situation, what we keep calling. And the second element is very critical, Arthur, is how quick we are on feet in terms of bouncing back, and then not only walking but running together. And that's where the agility of the leadership, that's where the agility of the organization, That where's the agility of the way the entire processes, systems, policies have been designed for the organization. You can say get tested.
Okay. All right. Well, now let me ask you a question. Right. So, I mean, we're talking about strategy. We're talking about, the goals of culture. We're talking about risk management. Okay. So, I mean, give me a, the brief rundown, because a lot of people haven't read your book. So give me the brief rundown between plan A, plan B, and plan C.
Sure, Arthur. So, basis the research and very extensive research I have done, and even you are partner to that research. There has been a considerable inputs came from the CEOs and CXOs that culture is one of the most important element of their agenda. But when it comes to the actual implementation, I think that's where the gap was, and that's where their entire mindset, what you call, got exposed. And I can, what you call, categorize that mindset, leadership mindset, in three areas. Plan A are the leadership which is driven by having a great business plan and actioning those business plans. So plan A stand for action, very action oriented leadership. I think 80% of the organization across the globe, or enterprise or startups, mostly are driven by plan A mindset. The other mindset is called plan B mindset, which is primarily backup. B stand for backup. This mindset is primarily driven by, if plan A doesn't work, how I'm going to mitigate my risk, how I'm going to have a backup plan to fall back on. So that these are risk averse companies or enterprise or leadership, and I categorize them as a plan B. And say around 10 to 12% among those 80% would be those plan B organization. Last is the plan C organization, which are the organization where the leadership is having a very clear focus, sharp focus on building a culture, building a ecosystem, building a work environment, building a role model leadership behavior, which inspire commitment, which inspire passion, which inspire a discretionary performance. And that's where you get a not only incremental gains or growth, you get exponential growth, which is sustainable. In plan A and plan B, the performance is not sustainable. It is inconsistent. That also research throws. And if you try to calculate hypothetically, Arthur, the entire last century, the kind of opportunity losses plan A and plan B organization have done in value term, I think it will run in $1 trillion, trillions of dollars. Yeah,
Wow.
that's the very very serious part. Nobody, because success is the stepping stone of failure, right? So, like failure is a stepping stone of success. We continue to repeat success formula all the time, and plan A and plan B has been a very conventional formula for achieving growth. So,
Well,
plan C,
and that's
sorry.
where, again, plan C, okay, creating that culture right now in the pandemic. I mean, I mean, there's different kinds of cultures, right? I mean, you've got, very strict and even structured cultures that also limit innovation. But then you've also, there's cultures that are very agile, and those are the cultures that are thriving now. Okay, so how do you, so when you're focusing on culture, I mean, how do you determine what type of culture? I mean, right now, of course, everybody's like retroactively thinking, oh, we should have had this kind of culture, but how do you figure out what kind of culture you're supposed to have?
I think if you see the Plan C book, it starts with a very interesting quote that culture eats strategy all three meals, and the meal is served by the CEO and the CXO. So I think the point is very, very clear that it's high time that the shift should happen from having these strategy reviews and risk management plan reviews to seeing what is the kind of culture I want to create in the organization. To your question that what kind of culture would be good for the organization, I think first thing first is we need to assess what is my current culture? What are the some of the uh, pluses and minuses of my existing culture? Is it delivering me the goods? And that's where your ocean tool comes into picture, because that gives you a very, very clear picture whether you are currently at a blame culture, or you are a brand congruent culture, or you're absolutely synergized culture. So I think that's the number one requirement. Once you know where you are today, obviously you know where you want to reach. What is the kind of a goal you have, vision you have, milestone you want to achieve, and then you try to align your existing culture in line with the desired one. And that's where a lot of inputting comes from your even directive communication tools, whether it is your colored brain, whether it is your emotion drivers, whether the way you try to create a no blame environment into the organization, the way you kind of bring a lot of synergy through diversity and diverse thinking and diverse behavior. Ultimate objective is the culture needs to assimilate, culture needs to encourage diversity, culture needs to be inclusive, culture needs to again support your strategy to deliver the goods, culture needs to create an environment where there is a stickiness in the organization, where talent doesn't want to go out. They love to work in that organization, they love to work in that environment, they love to contribute in that environment. And I think that's where I think the leadership biggest win in terms of building a legacy better than what you got.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So, what would be some of the specific pandemic factors that would help organizations build a culture to take them out of the pandemic? Because the pandemic is, I mean, in some, it depends on where you are in the world.
Right.
Okay, but some parts of the world are the same as it was, last year. In some cases, even worse. While others, like America, for example, it's like, you know, whatever. Uh, and so you've got different governments that are dealing with it in different ways, and of course that also those governmental policies are also going to be affecting organizations. So what are some of the strategies that organizations can do now in order to support a culture that is going to make sure that they come out on top as the pandemic eventually lifts? If it does, even in the next year, we don't know.
True, very true. No, I think we have entered a world, Arthur, now, which is going to have these kind of pandemics coming more often than earlier times. Reason being, the way we have now created a ecosystem in terms of the way we are fiddled with the nature, pandemics are going to continue to become more stronger and serious. That's the kind of research which is coming through from the scientific world, and that's where it's high time. It's high time that the learning from the entire pandemic has to be translated into a reference point for our blueprint for making a very agile and resilient culture. Now, what are some of the takeaways from this entire experience of handling the pandemic? One of the most important aspect is uh, we were not ready when this pandemic hit us. We just assumed that this is one of the very temporary change or some kind of a temporary impact. It will go away in few months and that's it. Like it happened in past in different parts of the regions. Never ever imagined that it become a global pandemic, and then that to stay for a more than 2 years now. So readiness was not there. Number two, there was no what you call fallback orientation in terms of okay how to manage this crisis as far as the the entire managing the people element of business is concerned. Uh, there was a work from home policy suddenly came up. People were absolutely not aware how to manage the productivity of people working from home. There was a hybrid environment suddenly there, which came into place. So the entire workplace suddenly got changed for non-IT companies as well. IT already had a this kind of what you call working wherein there was a work from home culture. But for non-IT people across the world, this was a first thing first experience. So the point which I'm trying to make, Arthur, is that the entire anticipation, the entire readiness, the entire responsiveness element of the organization leadership, I think has got really, tested in this pandemic time. And I think if you have to put a score there, I think everybody fared not more than 3 out of 10. So that's the where the issue is. Now, if we have to now shift this entire paradigm on its head to make the entire organization leadership very resilient, agile, have high level of readiness, high level of anticipation, high level of you can say creating a environment which is very high of empathy, high of listening, high of care. People are suffering from a lot of mental agony and problem. Nobody has ever lived life like this, with no social interface, with no what you call connect with the people. Suddenly, your one of the key need in your Maslow hierarchy of social needs absolutely become zero. Now, how to cope up that part? And I think this is not only about enterprise and or only about organization. I think even the nation leader, even the global leader had to now ponder upon this aspect that if they have to make this what you call world or the globe worth living, we need to have plan C for the entire globe and not only for the organization and enterprise and startups. So that's a very limited view of looking at the plan C. So that's where I think we need to shift that, build the readiness, build the agility, build the resilience, create empathy, create a high level of connect in the entire way the organization operate, and accordingly then you can say build a roadmap of irreversible improvement, irreversible growth, irreversible you can say impact.
All right. So okay. So I get this, but now how are you going to do this? Okay, because before, I mean, when you're face to face, people are communicating. You've got that connection. You've got all that stuff. But these days, people are, well, they're not. They're on Zoom or some other platform, or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts. Okay, and they're working from home. So how do you manifest this culture in a hybrid type of environment where people go between office and, well, basically video conferencing and still stay at home?
So while the environment has become hybrid, I think the foundation of how culture operate doesn't change. What are the foundation of the culture? The foundation of culture is role modeling of the consistent, you can say, high performance behavior by the leadership. Now, it can happen through Zoom, it can happen through any kind of platform. In terms of the way you, what you call, dispose your communication with the larger team, the way you what you call communicate, the way you listening to their issues and responding to their issues, the way you are trying to address the entire empathy element in the way you're managing your team and productivity.
Okay, so right now, though, what you're talking about is very leadership centered, okay, which basically means that the leader has to be super, super crazy busy doing all this stuff. What about creating a bottom up type initiative where the people actually feel the ownership and take charge, and be the leaders for each of their own areas, in which case then The leader only needs to essentially support the people to create a culture that is supporting them, rather than being the guy that's responsible for everything, or girl.
No, no, fair point, Arthur. I think there are two school of thought, and there are two type of organization where top down and bottom up, what you call culture building works. Most of the organization, conventional and unconventional, I think the vision of the leader get translated into the way, the kind of culture you want to create. There are mature organization, and I think there are a lot of such organization which is, I will say, matured now, where the bottom up is also one of the way to build the kind of what do you call work environment the people want to create. And I think that's where the entire element of listening and communication become very critical. So if the entire team down below is giving a kind of a feedback, or giving a kind of you can say insights, that we need to have this kind of a culture where there is a lot of collaboration happening, there is a lot of innovation happening, there is a lot of entrepreneurship is happening, there is a lot of excellence happening. I think the stakeholders have to listen. The managers, the senior leaders have to listen to that, and then translate those insights or inputs which is coming in into some level of, you can say, engagement, some level of participative you can say activities, by which the I will say thought leaders, or I will say influencers, or those culture anchors, they can then help the entire bottom up approach to get synergized with the top down thought process, and that is more sustainable.
So, what do you think about this, Sanjeev? Okay. Um, do you feel that most organizations that try to do top down culture programs are primarily because the leader feels that, there might lose a little bit of control, and may feel that they are not going to achieve the results because they essentially feel that they know more than everybody else?
Possibly, possibly, but I think there is a convention. Now, the convention is that like father, like son, like the head of the family, the entire value system of the family also get created. So, culture is mostly perceived as the behaviors role model by the most influential people in the organization, right? Now, who are those most influential people? Now, depending upon again the maturity of the organization, the most influential people can move from being just leaders or the title holders to the people who are the influencers, and even the last person in the entire organization system. So I think the marriage of both top down and bottom up approach, I believe, is more sustainable model culture, which is long lasting, which is very inclusive, very what you call it, diversity oriented, and because there is ownership from not only the top guy but also the bottom guy, and because it has come from them, the ownership is also very high level, and I think that's the key for the sustainability of the that particular culture to remain in the organization for long and give the desired benefit.
Right. So let's say, for example, if this is if it is the leader that essentially defines the culture, or the CEO, what happens when the leader changes?
Culture change.
Okay, and so therefore you basically lose this element of sustainability.
True.
Okay.
True.
And the now granted, I mean, it depends on the type of leader. Even if you have a people owned organizational culture, I mean, there are very specific ego-driven leaders that just will try to destroy everything. I mean, look at what happened in the American government, right?
Correct.
Um, we're not going to go there, okay?
Absolutely.
But what happens is that, see, if you have these people that will, even if it's, let's say, a reasonably large organization, you've got a CEO that is trying to do something, but what if the middle management isn't part of the, isn't really, embracing what the CEO wants? Okay, and does that happen?
No, absolutely. I think it's culture transformation, culture improvement journey. I think is one of the most, I will say, sensitive way of doing things. It's not like a kind of a mathematical formula that A plus B give you C. That's not the way. So, and most of the time, the entire culture transformation initiative fails because there's a disconnect between the senior management vis-a-vis the middle management vis-a-vis the front lines. And I think that's where I will say it's very important for the leaders to be very agile in terms of their listening, very sensitive to understand what they intend to achieve out of this culture transformation journey. Are they creating disruptions, or are they creating something sustainable? Now, there is a thought process where you can say, no, because everything of past was bad, so I will just create high level of disruption. But then disruption has its own merits and demerits, right? And most of the time demerits because there is a hardly any what you call emotional and psychological support to those disruptive ideas, and you have to engage your people across the levels, and that is a very important part of the role as part of the culture transformation journey. How to engage the emotional and psychological being of your team. Otherwise it's not a very academic and theoretical exercise. It
And
has
again,
to
it
be.
brings us back to the idea of how is it easier for 1,000 people to come together and convince the top 5 people of what kind of a culture they want, or is it easier for 5 people to convince 1,000?
Logically, the earlier part is the most practical one, where 1,000 people is convincing 5 people. But the weightage of the 5 people is always higher than the 1,000 people, because in an organization structure, they are the people who finally take the shot or call the shot. So I think it's a midway somewhere. There is nothing called this way or that way. I think there is something called midway, and I always call that middle line, rather than only focusing on top line and the bottom line. The middle line is a critical piece, wherein the top five articulate what they intend to achieve through this culture transformation through the plan C, and then engage the 1,000 people down below in terms of how they see this articulation getting translated into action through them. And I think this kind of engagement really embarks on I will say, a journey where there is a high amount of synergy, there is high amount of buy-in, there is a high amount of positive vibes, there is a high amount of acceptance, there is a high amount of, as I said, ownership. And rest assured, I think that's I will call the participative leadership, or the very highly inspiring and engaging leadership, which ultimately, what you call, make the differentiation between organization with a very, very, as I said, temporary culture vis-a-vis a organization which with got a very institutionalized culture.
All right, all right. Well, I got I got to ask you one last thing here, okay?
Yeah.
What would basically be 3 action steps that somebody could take right now, whether they're the CEO or a manager or even an HR person, in order to start on their journey to improve their culture?
I think first thing first, I think they should immediately huddle and try to understand the the what are the current aspect of the culture which is really impacting the overall organization performance. So where they are currently, I think that should be the first thing first, which generally doesn't happen most of the time. We generally take a very impulsive decisions on the culture
So
transformation.
benchmark.
Benchmark and do the assessment of their current culture. Number one. Number two is then define with the help of, as you said, top down and bottom up approach, what is the culture vision for the organization? What kind of culture they want to achieve, which will not only help the business financials and business results to be achieved, but also create, as I said, a legacy which continued beyond the founders, beyond the CEOs, beyond the entire CXO team, in terms of one of the best culture to work for or be with. That's number two. And number three is obviously engage the culture experts like you and me in helping these CEOs and CXOs to create a very robust blueprint of achieving the whatever they have got to discover through the assessment and the benchmarking and the culture vision exercise in terms of implementing the fundamentals and foundation of culture transformation journey blueprint.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Sanjeev, how do they do that?
So they can connect me through my email. I am available on obviously on the entire DCI team network as well. Also, there is a website of mine called planc.club, wherein they can also go and share their interests in terms of engagement. And then finally, there is an email ID sanjeev.dixit3@gmail.com, where they can just drop a mail, and I will be always available to respond to them.
All right, fantastic. All right, Sanjeev. Well, I am very grateful to have you on here, and I feel that we had a really good discussion. So, any last words that you want to give the audience?
So I think we should make the plan C for not only for the organization but for ourselves as well, because that also enable us to achieve a significant individual transformation, and definitely do that beside the plan C, do the color brain, engage with the entire directive communication, you can say program, and discover your own, you can say, potential and strengths, and then just unleash your, I will say, all the possibilities you have.
All right, brilliant. All right. Well, thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you for watching. And that is the end of today's Nights of Transformation. Hopefully, you got some really great tips, tricks, and well, basically some strategies to apply to transform your organization into something awesome. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arthur. Thanks a lot for giving this opportunity. Pleasure always connect with you, and thanks for inviting me on Nights of Transformation.
All right. See you.
See you. Thank you.